Growing up as a short student and navigating my teacher's classroom setup was kind of like playing a game of hide and seek. You see, my teachers always believed in arranging desks in perfect rows, which turns classrooms into a constant obstacle for someone like me. Inevitably, a taller person would always sit in front of me unless I chose to sit up front. Now, this would be a gamble because I had a really bad tendency to head bob and fall asleep pretty much every day in class. Now, fast forward to me being a teacher, it's taken a while for me to figure out exactly how to arrange seats and tables and desks in a way that avoids problems like this. And for the past 10 years in particular, it's something that I'm constantly trying to refine and that I'd like to discuss with my colleagues. Now, this isn't something that you are taught when you are going through your teacher preparation program because let's be honest, most of those professors have spent the majority of their careers at the dais instead of getting their hands dirty in the classroom. This means that if you're a newer teacher, or maybe you taught for a while but you've been stuck in rows and rows forever, then you're probably not getting any information on classroom arrangement from anywhere else. So today I'm discussing 3 crucial considerations when you're setting up your seats, desks, and chairs to create an optimal learning environment in your classroom. A well-designed classroom can greatly impact student engagement, collaboration, and overall learning outcomes. Now, the first consideration when setting up your desks and your seats is flexibility and movement. Now, you may recall that I've taught different subjects in different schools, different grade levels, and generally just different scenarios, and so you can benefit from my mistakes. When I first started teaching, I was a band teacher, so pretty much the way that bands or orchestras are set up is to have the rows situated so it looks sort of like a rainbow, where it's just little half circles that gradually get bigger from the front to the back. That's how I was used to having students arranged for the first 10 years of my teaching career. And so when I transitioned to English, I thought it would be kind of cool to have students sit that way as well. And so I arranged my desks in a way where they were, again, in a rainbow fashion with students sitting in an arc, and that way I could see all of their faces easily, and then they could also still talk to their neighbors. This worked for about a year until I realized one crucial thing. Flexibility and movement were not conducive in this environment. First of all, it was really hard to create groups or to have any kind of collaborative work aside from your shoulder partner. And if there were an uneven number of students in a row, then it would still be difficult to have groups of 3 work together. But more importantly, it was really hard for me to move around and help students because of the way that it was situated. Now, movement isn't an issue if you just plan to stand at the front of the room and lecture the entire time, or just have students work quietly and independently the entire time and basically have no kind of collaboration in your classroom. But if you want a classroom where students are engaged and students are working together, then you're going to need to think about movement. Can the students move around your classroom easily and access materials and work together with other people? Can you move around easily, or do you have everything crammed so tightly together that it's kind of awkward and you're constantly brushing up against students and their belongings? Now, rows definitely facilitate movement because you can easily move up and down rows, but at the same time, if you want to have students work together, yes, they can talk to their neighbor across the aisle, but what if they can't hear them? Or what if it's difficult for them to see each other's work? You're just not really creating an environment that just really fosters that type of collaboration. And yes, you could have students move the chairs back together and move them back in rows, but why not just have them sit in a way that just automatically fosters communication and a way to work with their peers? Now, I know for a lot of you, you are stuck with the equipment that you have, whether it's tables and chairs, or whether it's desks, or maybe you're lucky enough to have some kind of flexible seating or movable furniture. But either way, unless your desks and chairs are bolted to the ground, you can find alternate seating options that will facilitate flexibility and movement and definitely foster more collaboration and engagement in your classroom. So for example, the way that I have my desk set up here, they're all facing forward, but you can see that I have them in groups of 4, and sometimes I have them in groups of 2 or 3 or 5, depending on the number of students in my class. As you can see in this arrangement, the students are facing forward, which really makes it so that they're paying attention when I'm speaking, or if they're doing some kind of individual assignment or assessment, they're not as easily distracted. So on the left side, you can see that the students in the front row of that group are facing inward, which allows them to still see me completely if I need to talk to them. And on the right side, you can see that the front row completely turn themselves around so that they can face the people behind them and they can just work a little more focused in that way. And in terms of accessibility, this also goes with movement. So is it easy for students to access important things in the room? Do they have to really squeeze through rows or groups, or just really have to distract other people while they're walking by because you have things situated in a way that's inconvenient and, like I said, inaccessible to students? I know that in the past, I've had some of my groups set up in a way where one of the students or a couple of the students in the very back, it's kind of hard to get to them because it's sort of hard to walk around and I have to squeeze through, and it's a little bit awkward for everyone involved. So unfortunately, that student doesn't get as much help. And for me, subconsciously, I found myself trying to hurry through helping them so that I could just stop being in that awkward position and in that awkward place. So the next consideration when setting up your tables and chairs and desks in your classroom is visibility and accessibility. Now, to go back to my sad story about how I couldn't see anything because I'm such a short person, it became really apparent to me that visibility is crucial, especially if you want your students to really focus and be engaged in a lesson. Now, I know that teachers love how pretty rows look, or they want maybe different types of seating arrangements that still don't really work for students, but it is aesthetically pleasing. But we really want to focus on making it a more positive and effective learning environment and not necessarily so much focus on aesthetically pleasing environment. Let's just remember that rows are kind of the antithesis of visibility. Unless you have students arranged from shortest to tallest, shortest in the front and tallest in the back, it will be very difficult for a lot of your students to see the front, especially if you want them to pay attention to you. And also, the shorter students in the back or even midway are more likely to try to hide things from you because they know that they're being hidden by the tall person in front of them. Not that I have any experience with that. Now, this can also happen when students in their groups, or just the way that the desks are set up, are angled in kind of a strange way. So I've actually observed in classrooms teachers who have desks situated in a way where the student's back is facing the teacher, which just makes no sense to me. And they keep doing it over and over again. Or maybe it's not where the student's back is facing the teacher, but the student has to really contort their body to see the teacher when they're talking. Neither of these scenarios is conducive to a student paying attention to you. So just to demonstrate, if this seat was faced this way in this particular area of the classroom, the student could turn, but then they're constantly turning, or alternatively, they could also turn their body and write like this. Not so bad. But then in this corner of the room, they do have to turn a little more, and because of this bar, it's going to be hard for them to sit sideways like they did over there. They're writing like this and they're right-handed. It's just a little more difficult if I'm standing over there. And honestly, I've even seen some setups where the student is facing completely with their back to the teacher, so they might turn like this to listen to their teacher. But again, in their mind, they're wondering, when can I turn back and be more comfortable? So you can see here that these seats on the left side of the room are angled so that they are facing me, so that they can all see me clearly when I'm talking, and they can see the board when they need to, instead of being in rows or groups that are parallel to the wall. And then here in the middle, you can see that they are directly facing me because, again, they're in the middle. And then as I move to this side of the room, once again, they're angled. So it's kind of like an amphitheater feel. So I highly encourage you to go ahead and play around with different seating arrangements and groupings, but then I urge you to sit in just about every single seat. Yes, you have to cram your body into those little kindergarten chairs, but I want you to sit in all of those seats and imagine that you're that student. What is that student going to experience while sitting there? What are they going to have to do so that they can get the education that they really need and deserve? Do they have to completely do a 180 with their body everybody in order to see you. And if someone is already squirrely, doesn't really want to pay attention to you, are you setting them up for failure? Just make sure that all of the seats are easily visible and comfortable for the students, and that you can easily move around the room, and so can the students. It will make such a huge difference. And the third consideration is organization. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean how you maintain your cabinets and files and your Google Drive, because let me tell you, my Google Drive is insane. It's insane. There's zero organization there, and I should pay someone to really organize that. In any case, before I had iPads in my school, I had to use paper like a lot of you. And that meant that I needed to have materials accessible like pens and pencils, markers, highlighters, bins of papers, bins for students to submit work, etc. Can I just say I am so grateful that we have iPads and I don't need any of that anymore. In any case, I had to find a way to keep everything organized, and I've tried a lot of different things to see how I could make this work. For example, I would put the supplies in the back of the room, which seemed like a good idea because it was out of the way. However, that definitely turned into a disruption when students had to go in the back to get materials. So if you were one of the lucky ones sitting in the back and students had to go back there to collect papers, turn in assignments, or get a pen or pencil, then you would be disrupted and maybe even annoyed by them. The same thing goes for having those materials in the front. So I would have those things off to a table, off to the side near me, but then when students had to come up and grab those materials, then instead of paying attention to me while I'm talking, all the students were looking over there at the person trying to get the materials. Now, one method that I found to be particularly helpful was to have clear plastic boxes for each group, and in there would be things like Post-its and pens, pencils, highlighters, things like that, so that students can easily access those without having to walk around. And then when it was time to submit work, I found that having them stack their papers together and then having one student go around and picking all of that up during a transition was a lot less disruptive than having students walk to the back of the room or the front of the room to submit their assignment. In any case, in the same way that you want to think about what it's like when you sit in every single seat, you will also want to think about the flow, the workflow when students have to get materials. So it would really be helpful for you to walk through the classroom and see what students are going to have to do in order to grab a paper or have to walk over and grab a pencil. And if you find that it's not very convenient for them to do that in your setup, then maybe having a set at each group would really help. I've actually found that those materials don't walk away that much, that students tend to leave things there or sometimes even donate to the box. And another aspect of this is putting the onus on the students to stay organized. So you could have jobs for members in your group so that one person is in charge of putting things away, someone is a collector, someone hands out things, grabs things like that. That way there's some buy-in in terms of staying organized and you don't have to police everything. And that's definitely something that you're going to have to train students to do, especially in the younger grades. Now, all three of these considerations in terms of flexibility, movement, visibility, accessibility, and organization, this will really make it so that you have a positive and effective learning environment, which everybody wants and needs because it also helps with classroom management. So just keep these in mind as you're getting ready for this coming school year. You won't believe what a positive impact it's going to have in your classroom just by making a few tweaks. You can definitely do what I did, which is try an arrangement, give it a couple weeks to see if it works, and then change it, tweak it. Maybe all you have to do is just angle your desks a little bit differently like I did. I used to have it in one formation for a long time, and as I stood in the front of the room and I looked around while students were working, I realized, you know what, this isn't working out. I need to change something. So then I did. It's not a big deal and nothing is set in stone. Now, if your seating arrangements need some help, I bet your back to school routines do too. Click on this video next to learn about 5 outdated back to school trends that you need to ditch.